Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Start Justice. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice.
And I'm Jade Williams, the Policy and Advocacy Specialist at Jamaicans for Justice.
Now, we thank our listeners and our growing audience for joining us each week. And just as a reminder that you can call in at the studio line, which is 676-4996, as well as sending us a WhatsApp at 239-7583. We're also live streaming on our YouTube platform for JFJ, so you can join us there. And we have the Bridge 99 website, and of course you can join us via Radioland. Thanks again, and we hope you enjoy the show with us as we're going to be delving into the Integrity Commission's annual report, which was tabled in the House of Representatives last week. And we're going to be joined by Ms. Carol Narcisse, who's a civil society advocate, as well as Ms. Danielle Archer, who's a principal director of the National Integrity Action, and Ms. Archer is also an attorney at law. So, exciting topic, I believe, Jade.
I'd say exciting for you. This is one of your bread and butter areas.
Well, exciting for the country because it has several areas of concern for all of us. And
no, absolutely.
Maybe exciting is not the word, but quite an important topic that we all must be paying attention to as the whole parliamentary onslaught on the Integrity Commission continues. And I'm going to be reading some snippets of the report that the Integrity Commission would have put forward. But before we get into that, just want to plug the main human rights issue, only one, and the second one is the Integrity Commission matter. But the main one that I saw last week, which is an area of concern for us, we're aware that the Disabilities Act came into effect this year, February 14th, 2023.
Yes.
And this is after several years of it being passed, and several years before it being passed, it was being promised to come into effect. So I think over 2 decades, we can say we have been waiting on the Disabilities Act. It is finally here, but there was quite a concerning article coming out in the public space. And I believe the auntie or some relative to the mother would have tagged JFG on our Instagram page, saying to us that the mother noted firstly that the child passed for a Kingston High School, did quite well in her PEP exams, passed for the school looking forward to attending this high school in Kingston. And apparently when the mother was notified that the school had no provision to accept the child because the child has a physical disability, it is alleged that the mother was told that the school told her, rather, that the child would be better placed at School of Hope. For those who are familiar with the education services being provided for those with disabilities, my mother taught at School of Hope. And the children who were placed there were children with intellectual disabilities. Now, this Kingston High School has since indicated that they denied that part of the conversation, but did decry that they have no facility. The Ministry of Education, through Dr. Kassan Troop, stepped in. They spoke publicly on the matter, the Minister of Education as well, and indicated that several schools across the island will be seeing ramps being built. Welcome news.
Yes.
There was another article, however, where a Clarendon-based school, however, indicated that they are unable to accept another child with disability because they have no ramp at the school. What JFJ is saying to the Minister of Education and to the state overall, that having waited several years for the Disabilities Act to come into effect, it is quite disappointing that we don't have a sense of, one, what are the facilities that need to be built across state agencies, what are the types of services that ought to be put in place across state agencies to ensure that the state is moving in a right direction to be compliant with the very law that it passed in Parliament. I can say from JFJ's standpoint, we have persons with disabilities, those who are hearing impaired, who would go to the police station, for example, to indicate that they were raped, sexually assaulted, or violated in some other way, and there's no sign language interpreter. Nothing of that sort there to ensure that they can get access to justice. And we're saying to the government, we understand that financially maybe you can't do everything at once, but a timeline needs to be set. We need to get a sense that the government is really looking forward and looking ahead in getting things done. And that's what I'm urging the government to take adequate steps to ensure that the state itself is compliant with the very laws that it is passing.
Yes, I can't add anything to that, Mikhail.
I'll take a break, allow you to do the trivia, and then we get right into the Integrity Commission's annual report.
Okay, so before the trivia, we'll do the right of the day first. And the right of the day has to do with one of our international obligations under the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, Article 6, which states that our state has the responsibility to ensure that the fundamental principles of its legal system allows for the existence of a body that prevents corruption, and that the body that prevents corruption should have the necessary independence in accordance with the fundamental principles of that legal system to enable the body to carry out its functions effectively and free from undue influence. So that is one of our obligations under the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. And we'll go straight into our trivia question, which is, when exactly did we ratify that convention against corruption? So not signed, ratified that convention. And you can respond by sending us a WhatsApp at 2397583, or you can put your answer on our social media pages.
All right. So for today, thanks, Jade, we're unpacking the Integrity Commission's annual report.
Yes.
And before we get into the formalities, there are just some things I wanted to read from this report. And I'm going to start with the chairman's remarks in the annual report, that is Justice Seymour Panton. And I will summarize some aspects of it in the interest of time. Justice Panton says in his remarks, as a Commission of Parliament, one would have expected that Parliament as a whole would be working with the Commission in a cooperative way, with a view to lessening, if not eradicating, corruption in Jamaica. However, much of what has been happening in Parliament in recent times indicates that there's a concerted attack by some parliamentarians on the institution. It is as if there is a desire by them for the institution to be dismantled or at least frozen in fear. Justice Panton continues, the Commission has made several submissions for improvement to the legislation, and I pause here to just to insert that from the Integrity Commission was formed and became operational in 2018, every single annual report had several recommendations for the Parliament to act upon it. And one of the recommendations, I'm summarizing here Justice Panton's remarks in this paragraph, is that the Auditor General remains a fixture as a commissioner of the Integrity Commission. And I want to insert here that when JFJ made its submission to the Joint Select Committee reviewing the Integrity Commission Act, we had in fact recommended that the Auditor General ought not to be a member of the Integrity Commission. And I want to explain that our reasoning was not in keeping with the justification that you hear from parliamentarians. Our fear at the time at JFJ was that with the Auditor General being a constitutional authority and the Integrity Commission is not, whether or not there is a possibility that one would weaken the position of the other. That was the fear at JFJ. Having spoken to Professor Trevor Monroe, Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, and having read several remarks from the Integrity Commission and several other well-thinking Jamaicans, JFJ has revised its position. And I think, Jade, we need to make that very clear to the public through a short press statement, that our position now is that the Auditor General ought to remain a member of the Integrity Commission. So I just wanted to put that on record. But I want to quickly read another paragraph from Chairman Justice Seymour Panton. And it says, quite apart from the committee's top of the agenda item, I have noted the abusive, disrespectful, libellous language used by some parliamentarians in launching personal attacks under the cover of parliamentary privilege against persons connected with the commission. Right-thinking Jamaicans here and abroad have expressed to me and other commissioners how appalled they have been by the behavior of these parliamentarians. Some have even taken the vitriol onto party political platforms. This is great pity, says Justice Panton. I am sure that the foreigners in our midst are taking note of these developments. I am seeing true characters coming to the fore from some of the presentations, and what I see does not look good. Justice Panton says, and I'm skipping over some errors in the interest of time, he says we do not wear party political garb and reject any assertion of partisanship. We wish for the world to see Jamaica in a brighter light and hope that parliamentarians, in particular, will cooperate with the Commission instead of trying to tear it down. I urge parliamentarians to stop the nitpicking and the use of derogatory language. Now, that included some of the snippets from Justice Panton's remarks. I won't read some of those that were done by the Executive Director, Greg Christie, but there were two things that Mr. Christie said in his remarks that I think is worth noting. If you recall, there is an oversight committee of Parliament, a bipartisan committee that exists to provide some oversight of the Integrity Commission. And I noted this on my personal Twitter account. And Greg Christie said it, that 3 meetings with the Integrity Commission in 2 years could not have been what the Parliament had intended for this oversight committee. So parliamentarians were busy writing press releases left, right, and center, making derogatory comments about who at the Integrity Commission was lacking integrity. Very unfortunate, because you are besmirching the character of good people with those unfounded commentary in Parliament. But it was interesting to note that the Oversight Committee, they have not been meeting. Greg Christie also noted that there was seemingly a lack of understanding of the governance structure of the Integrity Commission. And that is something for us to take note. There have been several articles in the Jamaica Gleaner for the past 2 weeks around this particular issue and others. Peter, remind me of his last name, Jade.
Dispute.
Yes. He wrote an article, I believe it was in the Saturday paper.
Yes.
And what was interesting in that article, and several others, I may say, is that you clearly have parliamentarians who do not have a fundamental understanding of the Integrity Commission, because had they such an understanding, they would not be putting forward public statements, in my opinion, that would suggest that the Integrity Commission is somehow colluding across the departments and so on. But what was also interesting for me reading some of these articles is the fact that we need to be supportive of the Integrity Commission. And Lloyd Barnett, constitutional attorney, said it in another article today, that the Integrity Commission is certainly not beyond criticism. It is not infallible. There are several things that they have done that JFJ would have raised concerns about. That is beyond doubt. But the vitriol that we have been seeing coming from parliamentarians, and as Justice Panton said, covered in parliamentary privilege, as you damage people's character, is not what we would expect Parliament to be doing if it is that it is serious about ending corruption in the country. I will pause there just to allow for the break, and then we bring in our guest Jane, and then we can continue with the program. But I felt it was important that I read some of these areas in the annual report so that we get a sense of where the Commission's headspace is at, because I believe that they should be defending themselves if they believe that their character and that of the Integrity Commission overall is being called into certain dispute and disrepute that is unfounded. We take the break and we return.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. Today we are unpacking some of the key points from the Integrity Commission's annual report, which was tabled on Tuesday, July 11th in Parliament. Mikhail would have started out the program giving us some of the context from the remarks of the commissioners in the report, but the report also contained several concerning investigations that have been undertaken by the commission. So from that report, we would have heard 6 parliamentarians and 28 other public officials are being investigated for illicit enrichment, and another 7 lawmakers are being probed for providing false information to the commission. The commission further reported that 3 statutory declarations of public officials remain outstanding. Now, due to Section 53.3, which we call the Gag Clause commonly, the commission is unable to share any of the information associated with the investigations until the findings from those investigations have been tabled in Parliament. And this continues to draw criticism from several civil society actors, including JFJ and those joining us today. We are joined by Ms. Carol Narcisse and Ms. Danielle Archer.
Welcome, ladies.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
Lady Carol.
Hello, afternoon, Heidi.
Okay, so we will start with you, Miss Narcisse. So I know you would have been through the report already. So what are some of your major concerns from the findings of the report?
I think that we have an opportunity. We have had and we continue to have an opportunity as Jamaicans to familiarize ourselves with what this body that has been created by our Parliament, what its mandate is, what its activities have been, how it has been structured, what gaps there are in the resources that it has been given, the law that governs it says, what it can and cannot do, and in particular to familiarize ourselves with this report and the others that have been tabled. Mm-hmm. In it, I think in a process of making it our business to know more and to understand better, we will see that we have created an important institution, an important part of the framework for monitoring, ensuring that there is good stewardship of the resources of the country, and ensuring that where there are doubts about how things are being managed, implemented, etc., to do what investigations are necessary, to invite information to be brought to it, and to unearth as much as possible the facts of situations, and as per the law, refer matters either for prosecution or further investigation by other bodies, or referral to the Parliament, its ethics committee, etc., etc. So this report that we have tells us that the institution that we've set up to help to safeguard the national interest in terms of how our resources are used, that this body is operating at 30-something% less staff than it's supposed to have, right? So then we have to say to ourselves, all right, so if you're operating with 30-odd% less staff than you're supposed to have, that's going to have an impact on your results, right? On your output, on your capacity, etc. And if we read the report, we will see and understand the volume of public officers, because it's not just parliamentarians who are expected to file returns, etc. It's a large number of public officials that have to file returns to this body, which means it has to have significant capacity to sift through, to make sense out of the returns, and to, do what needs to be done in relation to the returns. As well, it has to follow contracts, how they are being awarded, etc., etc. So it has a lot. Its remit is broad. If we read the report, we ought to be heartened that a significant percentage of persons who are supposed to file are filing. That's a very important piece of information that we have. That means a significant portion of public officers are in compliance with the requirement that they file their returns, their declarations, etc. But we know that 30-something persons, 30-something public officials have been referred for investigations. Now, that's separate from the parliamentarians who have been referred.
Yes.
And it should be a matter of concern to us as citizens that we are unable to know who have been referred for what, and also to have the timely information about the outcomes of the investigations. If we know early who the persons are from the parliament, and we can decide what levels of public officials are to be named, because you may not necessarily want to name all of them, but perhaps the more senior persons with the most power, the most authority, the most responsibility for directing our resources. Maybe we say, okay, those we need to know who is being investigated so that we can provide information if we have it, etc. So the report, long answer, but the report provides us with important information about how our affairs are being conducted. It indicates to us where there are weaknesses that need to be fixed. It indicates where there are aspects of the law that are not serving us, right?
Right.
And we need to put our heads together to think about how that law needs to be improved.
So as you mentioned that, Ms. Narcisse, let's bring in Ms. Archer.
Yes.
Improving the law, Gag Clause, Daniel, what exactly, how do you think that Gag Clause would have impacted us knowing or not knowing what who are being investigated and so on?
Well, we could start from, I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Another half of the question. We could start from the perception, Michaela, where you say to yourself, who is being investigated and for what? I believe, and this is NIA's position, that you encourage people to report, to give information that may or may not be helpful, but nonetheless to provide information for the investigation, to have adequate information for it to proceed. When we don't know that an investigation is being conducted on Danielle, and we have no idea that this investigation is being done, can you give the information that you have at hand about Danielle? Right. No. And that is why NIA says that the Gag Clause stifles the public's ability to share information. It is for the very same reason that when the JCF is investigating, they note that there are persons of interest, and they ask the public if they know anything about this matter involving Danielle to come to the JCF and to say what they know. And that is why they disclose that they are people of interest or persons of interest. So it is a concern for the Gag Clause that it provides a kind of protection and a shroud around the politicians exclusively. What recommendations do NIA make? We simply say, we understand your fear of reputational damage. That may or may not be justified, but in understanding your fear, we propose that you place what is called a criteria, a checklist that the commission may use to determine when they speak, about what they speak, and how much they say. There is precedent for this coming from other jurisdictions. You can look at that criteria and lay out that criteria, which will allow the IC to utilize their discretion. And we advocate for this for the simple reason: the protection of the institution known as the Integrity Commission is above the personalities of all of us. This institution is as important as having a police force, as having a water commission, as having a public utility company called the JPS.
Yes.
This is how important it is. So if we have a problem, the problem has to have a solution, and it is not protecting the politicians. We will continue to say, amongst those who say nothing can go so, you are in public service. You put yourself out there above everyone else, and to whom much is given, much is expected. So it cannot be that we do not know what you are up to. And it cannot be that your family is more insulated than the family of somebody who is a simple man as a person of interest.
Daniel, we have to take the break, but when we return, I want you just to explain the importance of something for the listeners for me. Some people have been criticizing the annual report to say that you're paying billions of dollars to the Integrity Commission just to be doing mere administrative duties. That is the criticism I see on social media. I want you to explain the importance of the declaration, the importance of when false declarations are done. Why is it a cause of concern? So we take the break and then just ask Daniel to pick up, and then we follow up with Carol.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are joined by Ms. Daniel Archer and Ms. Carol Narcisse unpacking the annual report from the Integrity Commission. So before the break, Daniel, Michael was bringing up some of those social media criticisms, and a lot of it is based around the failure to provide information provision in the Integrity Commission Act, and the penalties thereof are quite low. We had made a recommendation from JFJ's end to increase those penalties, as we can see where that can provide a gap as to that provision of information. So firstly, we want to talk about why the declarations are important, first of all, and second of all, the kind of gap that we are seeing where we have that failure to provide information provision.
Take it for an understanding or appreciation of the need for statutory declarations from public officials.
Yes.
One of the major things that you want to be able to know is that there is no public official who is being enriched. So the statutory declarations simply allow the public to be satisfied that those who work within any public entity are taking their salary and they're not being or be the recipients of bribes. They're not the recipients of illegal gains. They're not the recipients of gifts. This is very important to ensuring that our governance structure remains as best as possible from being captured by lobbyists and persons who have funds to utilize the system for their own means. So persons who are in the public sector, because of the very fact that they are being paid by the public and their jobs oftentimes put them in a position to receive gifts or grants, the statutory declarations ensure that they are not the recipients of illicit gain.
Okay, so it's when you don't provide the statutory declaration or some information related to that you might fall afoul of section.
Correct.
Okay.
Or when you provide the information and it's inaccurate. So let us look, for instance, somebody providing 2 bank accounts, but you'd appreciate that when you and the IC has access to determining that, wait, you have 14 bank accounts. Why have you only declared 2? Excuse me?
I think one had 17 based on a report.
I was using it as an example, but I didn't want to go there, but that is correct. So if you have 17 and you close them over a period of time and you've only declared 2 or you declare 3, that's an immediate red flag right there. And you work in a place of customs where we all understand the importance of bribes. That's one of the problems that we're having down there. Correct?
But I'm sorry, Danielle.
Not a
May
problem.
I just ask raise one point here?
Yes.
So we might have seen the article by Dr. Garth Rattray in Sunday's paper, and if we didn't, I would recommend it.
Yes, yes.
Where he raises the question as to whether we should be making, as we review the Act, making some distinctions about which public officers we want to declare. So doctors in the public service, for example, who don't sign checks, they don't.
I can jump in on that before you even close the door on that. They're in the public service. There are allegations that there are doctors who use the public resources of a hospital to outfit their own clinics. It's not something we like to talk about.
And that has been plaguing the public sector for years.
Sure,
but
I just want
because I saw that article, and I'm particularly interested in raising for the public to understand that not because you're a doctor or a lawyer means that you're excluded from this, because you have an opportunity to take grants or gifts for the benefit of yourself. The purpose of the declarations are to ensure that you're not doing this. So you may be in the hospital, you're not signing checks. When I was in government as a crown counsel, I wasn't signing checks. I didn't receive any monies, but I occupied a position where I could be doing something that affects the public's interest with my job. I may decide that I'm taking monies from the patients who come in to give them a quicker or faster service. And so the declarations facilitate or enable that the persons who are in the public domain all operate once you're at a particular level. So there's already an exception. If you look at the legislation, it's not everybody who has to do a statutory declaration. It is those at a particular pay grade, because it is deemed that being at that particular pay grade comes with a certain level of responsibility and a certain responsibility, not just to handle monies. And we need to appreciate that. Corruption does not come just from the handling of monies. Corruption also appears and rears its ugly head in how we treat with the resources, whether it is time or the actual resources of a hospital or entity.
No, one of the things that we're not good at as a nation is engaging it's those who make policy and law, and those of us who understand perhaps the policy and law, we've taken the time to read it, etc. One of the things we need to do more is to have this, to create the space for public discussion and awareness raising and information. And actually that's one of the roles that the IC has, is informing the public so that people can understand the nuances involved, right?
Yes.
The whys and wherefores. Understand, for example, that no, not everyone declares. Here is who declares, so that there is, because part of what is occurring is that in the absence of wide public knowledge and awareness, the disinformation can take root.
Yes. And I think some people, just to interject, they just want that big case involving some big parliamentarian in their minds, that in their mind would have been involving some $1 million corruption scheme. Versus when I look at the news report, the article that indicated, I think, 5 medical doctors from a particular region, they were being investigated. I don't want to misquote the article, but I think the public backlash on that was, what is the IC doing? Why are they not going after the big fish kind of mentality? Yeah. So I can appreciate what you were saying, Ms. Narcisse, and I appreciate what Daniel is saying as well. But the need for that public education, because when I look at the Integrity Commission's social media platform, I had the privilege of teaching ethics. And when I asked students, so many of you steal, they said, Ms. Jackson, you're offending me. But when I said, okay, that big booklet that I gave you to print, where did you print it? They started laughing. So I saw some of those social media posts, but I think the public education, it has to go beyond social media, and the Integrity Commission, it needs to be in the community, in some of the public sector offices, with the team on the ground, giving that sort of dialogue. And
I'll jump right there, because that, is NIA's purview. That is something we're interested in. That is something we're going to be encouraging, and that is something that we want people to understand. Integrity is what we're talking about. Michaela. That is when you go to work on time and you don't thief the time, when you don't use your supplies for your own purpose, or even simply going to work and taking breakfast. So work start at 8:30 and you stroll in at 8:30, eat your breakfast at 9 o'clock and start work 9:30. Those are things that if you were to have an assessment of the value of loss, it affects productivity, it goes to good governance. Those are aspects of corruption. So you asked a question before the break about the administrativeness of all of these things that the IC is doing, but it's more than an administration. We can look to many things and say it's administrativeness. The court is an administrative institution because we want to be able to dismiss it and say that's all they're up to. But if you look at the report itself, you can see the work that is being done. You can actually see that people are complaining. They had 158 complaints. Of the 158 complaints, 59 were referred for investigation. 58 were closed and 18 matters were kept for them to look upon. You see more people complaining, more investigations. You also saw where in terms of the protected disclosures, that there are persons that the public bodies are putting in place guidelines for public disclosures. And the Commission actually approved, 109 of the applications that they received. There is work being done. Governance involves administration.
And they are the designated authority for the Protected Disclosure Act.
So there is work being done. So you can't say quote unquote and dismiss it because it's administrative. Managing corruption, entities, individuals, all take time. We seek to dismiss them because oftentimes we focus on the politics or the individual. We need to get to that point where we understand as a nation that corruption is not just about just the politicians, but it also involves the use of public funds, public resources.
And Daniel, I know Carol has to go shortly, but I hope you can stay with me, Daniel, just for a few more minutes. Carol, before you leave, importance of oversight committee. If you could just explain that for the listeners for me.
So one of the challenges we have is that we are not aware of the committees of Parliament because many of them don't meet and they don't function and they don't discharge their responsibilities. One of the recalcitrant committees is the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee of Parliament, which in the report it indicates that, in any given year, that committee might meet once, right? Or if you're lucky, twice. And of 14 reports that the IC has tabled in the time of its existence, that committee has reviewed, I think it is one. So what is the importance of that committee? That committee is supposed to, if that committee were functioning, we perhaps would not have a lot of the misunderstanding of what the roles are of the commission, what resources it has available to it, et cetera, et cetera.
And the staffing issues you were highlighting.
The staffing issues. I mean, it took 2 years for the recommended structure for the commission to be approved, in which time they couldn't hire, right? So we talk about it being there for 5 years. Well, actually, it's really only been functional for 3 of those 5 years because the people who are supposed to make sure that the things are in place were not doing their job. Now, if there were the oversight body, it would be aware of how long, the time that it's taking for approvals to be granted. It would go back to the wider parliament, and it would say, this cannot continue, we have to make changes. So its role is to monitor and ensure that the systems, structures, and all the elements that are to make for an effective commission, that those are in place. And where they are not, to bring the matter back to the parliament. It also reads and updates itself on the reports, and where there are actions that are to follow from the reports, it is supposed to lead the way in the parliament with ensuring that those actions are taken, right? So if, for example, someone is referred to the Ethics Committee of Parliament, that this IC Oversight Committee would make itself aware of this and would ensure that it speaks to the ethics committee, which is another one that doesn't meet.
Yes.
And so on and so forth.
And I want to plug here, Carol, that to be fair to the chair of the Oversight Committee, Minister Edmund Bartlett, he has been one of the sober voices on the Integrity Commission. But again, we still have to urge the chair, Minister Bartlett, to ensure that his committee meets frequently.
That's right.
And to get the job done. That
and if he, because he's a minister, is hard pressed as chair, then designate deputy chair to do what needs to be done. Now,
I don't want you to leave, Carol, without asking you this question. Please forgive me. And Daniel, I know you're holding.
Can I just say this?
Please.
And maybe Daniel can elaborate on it. One of the arguments going on now is that the Oversight Committee is supposed to essentially be directing, right? The Commission should decide if the report should look at the report.
That's the question I wanted you to touch on, yes.
No, that is not what it was set up. That's not in the standing orders.
Not at all.
That's not its role.
Not at all.
And in fact, the Act is very clear that the Commission is not subject to the direction of any entity other than the court.
Yes.
Right?
It seemed to be stretching the reading, the letter of the law, in my opinion, with that position coming out of Parliament for the oversight.
It is deliberately misrepresenting what the role should be, because there is a narrative to be advanced that this IC is operating like a out-of-control loose cannon that is just out to embarrass our elected representatives. This is not the case. And our elected representatives must ask themselves, why is this? If you notice, many of our oversight bodies go through a period of this period of angst and hostility.
Yes.
In the early days of the electoral office and commission, the director of elections would get it. And contractor general back in the day would get it. And Indicom gets it. And so there is a pattern of resistance to oversight, resistance to being held accountable, resistance to having to answer questions, resistance to being investigated independently, etc. And we, the citizenry, must be concerned and wanting to know what is the reason for this resistance. What is the fear? What is being hidden? What are people wanting to remain? Is it in our interest to have this resistance be the default position?
Yes, and rise above the partisan, tendencies and ask the probing questions as Jamaican citizens would be my recommendation as well.
Indeed.
Thank you so much, Carol. I know you have to go.
Yes, thank you for the time and the opportunity.
We appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Daniel, Jade has a question for you. I know Lloyd Barnett, Dr. Lloyd Barnett, constitutional attorney, someone who I think we all collectively respect. He was in the Jamaica Gleaner today talking about the Auditor General's report. So, Jade?
Yes, so my question was really, we have been challenged by these reports not being tabled for what was it now, like 2 months?
How long?
I think it was.
Well, if Daniel, if you could just walk us through the matter of the Auditor General's.
Well, I think if you're gonna go to which is a good place to start.
Yes.
The fact that Madam Speaker of the House has indicated that she has taken a particular view in respect of tabling the Auditor General's reports once she has them, has received them. Her position seems to be that she is not required to table them immediately. And in fact, she has indicated that she would not follow this practice as the law does not foresee that. I believe the position of Dr. Barnett, which you have properly indicated, cannot be denied that he is our foremost constitutional attorney who has indicated that that position isn't true.
Yes.
And having put that forward, he has indicated that that is not the best interpretation of the legislation. What I would urge us to do, and that is one of the reasons NIA has held its hand, so to speak, besides calling out that it is inappropriate, is to say, since the matter has been sent to the Attorney General for review, let's hear what he has to say. But whilst we wait, one of the things I want to encourage every Jamaican to consider is the importance of these reports.
Yes.
These reports coming from the Auditor General, and the Auditor General is no baby in terms of history. From 1800s, this Auditor General office exists. Over time, it has become more independent and protected by the Constitution. But let's understand what the Auditor General does. Who monitors public money? Not the MPs, not Madam Speaker. The IC does not monitor public money. The IC monitors the fact that these persons who are put in place are to use it in a particular way. But who counts every dollar and every cent?
Yes.
And if you manage your house, you want to make sure, say, somebody managing that money.
Yes, yes.
So Jamaica is the host, and we have to make sure that the monies that come in that are spent for roads or water or whatever construction activities that we're having, whatever equipment we're buying, whatever service we're paying for, that every dollar can be accounted for.
Yes.
And that's what the Auditor General does. It's not a political office. It's an office that is to be examined the public purse and to make sure that it's being done so that in the interest of the public. So we judge the Auditor General by whether or not every cent is being accounted for. So if the government, through Madam Speaker, takes a position, we're not going to tell you right now, we're going to tell you when we're ready how the monies are being done. Is that the best thing for accountability and transparency? It look good?
And what I'm personally disappointed about, Daniel, even if the matter was in fact referred to the Attorney General, I think enough time has passed, given the urgency of the issue, for us to know.
What I would say, Michaela, is that you look at everything together in court.
Yes.
We use the word circumstantial evidence.
Yes.
One of the things that should be a concern is the appearance of the intention to not share with the public this information.
Yes.
We can't speak to what is in the mind of our legislators. We can't say them hide something for sure. We don't know. But what we can say is it appears that there is a trend, an action, some kind of determination, some kind of intent to keep things quiet or secret.
Yes.
That does not augur well for good governance. And so even if it is that you're saying that is the law, the practice has been that you have shared it with the public. Question, why would you suddenly stop sharing with the public? Is there something in it that you do not want the public to know? And if so, is this in the best interest of us as citizens? Should we be saying, what's up? Why are you hiding? Shouldn't we know? It's our business after all. It's not a private transaction. These things are done for the public interest. Can we please know? And I say that to say that one of the things we have to be mindful of is that when we talk about accountability and transparency, we need to make sure that our legislation encourages it.
Yes.
And where it doesn't, we need to move with alacrity. So if you look at the IC's report, I tell you everything has connections. It points out to the delay, the time taken for them to get the legislative framework, for them to even have statutory declarations filed by email.
Yes.
It speaks to the delay of our legislators in having laws that facilitate accountability and transparency. So if by chance this is so, after sitting there for so long, Madam Speaker just discovered it overnight that what she was doing was contrary to law, and we're going to wait with bated breath for what was a good practice to now be shelved because it is, in your opinion, something that is contrary to law.
And again, we can't separate that from the signal being sent that the Integrity Commission's report will first be reviewed by the Oversight Committee. So when
the
you put all
question has
together,
to be, is there motive? What is the reason for keeping us not wanting to share this information with us? And that is why we keep saying that for good governance, accountability, and transparency, if you are the legislators, you are the people who make the law, and you are seeing loopholes where things can get hidden and covered up, in the interest of the public, pass, correct, or improve legislation to ensure that there is adequate accountability and transparency.
yes,
That's really what we need to do. And so when you have legislators who go to Parliament or rarely go to Parliament, you will know my pet peeve, Michaela, the fact that we take so long to pass legislation. And we take so long because if we're not going to work, then we can't pass nothing. Because nobody not there to do no work.
not at all.
Legislation is there and outstanding. I keep telling people, this excuse that the red tape exists. I know me, you, or Jade make red tape, Are the same law people make the red tape.
Yes, yes.
So they are the ones who have the power with the scissors to cut it.
We have to leave it there, Daniel. But last word from you before you have to go.
Let's not look at the IC as just being a mere administrative feature.
Yes.
We need to look at the institution of the IC and appreciate that it is a step in the very best direction to ensure that corruption is reduced in Jamaica. They have a lot of work to do when it comes to public education, and the most we can do for our part is to keep asking questions, not to debase them, but to encourage the work that they do.
Absolutely, well said. Thank you so much. That was Daniel Archer, Attorney at Law, Principal Director of National Integrity Action, and we were joined earlier by Carol Narcisse, Civil Society Advocate. We thank both ladies, as usual, very good partners of JFJ, and we appreciate their views. Jade, one of the things that in recent times, I'm even more adamant and strident in JFJ's position, that when we see the matters unfolding in Parliament, it really brings to light the importance of the constitutional protection of the Integrity Commission.
Yes.
We will not back down on that recommendation. I personally care not about the views of others who indicate that it's too far-fetched of a notion. When we see a minister can go in Parliament and say people are lacking in integrity, remove the protection of privilege and immunity so you can sue the commissioners and their agents who are acting in good faith.
Yes.
It is even more important for constitutional protection for the Integrity Commission. So we're adamant on that. And the last thing I wanted to point out before I turn over to you, when we look on the report, listeners, complaints and protected disclosures refer to the investigation division. You're seeing an increase. I want to encourage those who believe that it is safe to do so to make those disclosures internally. If you see any acts of corruption, any human rights violation, anything that runs contrary to best practice and law in your office, make the report internally. And if internally there is failure to act, you can go to prescribed authorities as provided for under the Protected Disclosure Act, which would include the Integrity Commission, who is the designated authority, Office of the Public Defender and others. You're not allowed to go to the media. JFJ had made a recommendation for other external disclosures to be made, but just keep that in mind and watch our social media pages. We're going to be making some social media posts on protected disclosure going forward, because I think we all need to be blowing the whistle when it comes to corruption in a matter that is in keeping with the law.
Yes, so in the end of the show now, we did have a winner for our trivia this week. It was Kamala B. The answer for our trivia was March 5th, 2008. That was the date that Jamaica ratified the Convention Against Corruption.
Thanks for that knowledge. I did not know.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us this week on what ended up being another week of education for me, and explosive, important discussion. I'm Jade Williams from Jamaicans for Justice.
And I'm Michael Jackson, Executive Director. Thank you so much for joining us, and keep being informed, and just join us each week. We will have good information for you. What good?